Isn't that a great song to sing on a Spirit Sunday? And I want to just give some brief reflections today. And I had a pretty staid sermon for Pentecost. It was kind of energetic and all that kind of stuff. And then I saw the sermon at Harry and Megan's wedding. And I thought, okay, we have just had a Pentecost experience. There was 1 billion people who watched that sermon. And you know what? There's lots of opinions about it. And shall we say, mild criticisms of it. It was too much this way, too much that way, too much. And I thought to myself, this is the Pentecost story, right? Bishop Curry, a black man from America, he doesn't often get invited to preach at Westminster Abbey. His is a voice that is most often silenced. And I thought about the disciples. You know, they were so discouraged and downhearted when Jesus was crucified, when he was no longer there to lead them. And it took them 50 days. And during that time, they thought they saw glimpses of him. They had the experience of when they were sitting down to eat, that he came and was with them. So it took them a while to see that, like, they didn't feel as separate from him as they had feared, but it was nothing that would empower them to keep the movement going. They felt like it was another failed attempt to break free of the chains that Rome held on them. And instead they felt like the status quo had won again. And then this Holy Spirit came to them. And the scriptures say it was like tongues of fire came into the room, and there was such energy. And it was like a tongue of fire was on each of them. And that woke them up. In other religious traditions, we would refer to this as the awakening. Their eyes were opened, and they saw that they were not actually alone, and that they could carry on, and that they could move out into the marketplace. Now, the marketplace was the place that had all of the population, right? Everybody's there. It's the busy place. They didn't have anything like the World Wide Web. But what the disciples and who they spoke to that day, well, that was the equivalent of the 1 billion people that Bishop Curry spoke to. More than they had ever imagined they could touch. And all because they felt empowered, and awake because this tongue of fire had come to them. I wonder what that tongue of fire was. In Bishop Curry's speech, and in his sermon, he spoke about that love is fire. He talked about the French Jesuit, and I'm never going to say this right, so just correct me. So Pierre, okay, you heard it over there. He was at once a scientist, a Roman Catholic priest, and a theologian and a mystic. And so here I'm quoting Bishop Curry. He says, Pierre was one of the greatest minds and spirits of the 20th century. And he suggested that the discovery and the harnessing of fire was one of the great scientific and technological discoveries of human history. Fire, to a great extent, made human civilization possible. Fire made it possible to cook food, thereby reducing the spread of disease. Fire made it possible to stay warm in cold climates, therefore marking human migration around the world, making human migration around the world a possibility. Fire made the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the Industrial Revolution possible. The advances of science and technology are greatly dependent, he said, on the human capacity to take fire and use it for human good. He talked about how he didn't walk on water to get to the wedding, but he flew in a plane, and the controlled fire in that plane got me here. He said fire makes it possible for us to text, tweet, email, Instagram, and Facebook, and socially be dysfunctional with each other. Fire makes all of that possible, he said. Desjardins said that fire is one of the greatest discoveries of all of human histories. He then went on to say that if humanity ever harnesses the energy of fire again, if humanity ever captures the energy of love, then for the second time in the history of the world, we will have discovered fire. What if that tongue of fire that touched each of the disciples and that woke them up and empowered them in ways they had never imagined? What if that was the power of love? What if it was that suddenly the way Jesus had been and the way he acted with people, whether they had previously been condemned or not, whether or not they were judged to be poor by society's standards or outcasts, that the power of the love that Jesus had shown them, they got it. And that what we see in the Pentecost experience is them feeling so empowered by this magnificent vision of love that they can't help themselves. They get out of their rooms, they go outdoors, and they just have to share it with people. I kind of like that picture. I love the idea that Pentecost is really a spiritual awakening. And it is what has allowed the Christian movement, the way of Jesus, to grow and expand. Today we had people who expressed their belonging by coming to, by joining here at St. Aidan's. And that's great. But Pentecost reminds us that it's not just our local group we join. It is a worldwide movement of love put into action, which is justice, of people treating each other so respectfully, of voices that have been silenced being put front and center before us. You know, not everybody likes that. In fact, in the story from Acts, everybody heard this, but then right away people tried to dismiss it. They said, oh, they're just drunk. You know, pick your criticism. But in fact, it doesn't matter that people criticize or people try to get us back to the status quo. The power of love, once it's unleashed in us and in our community and in our world, why, you can't put it back. So today, whatever the analysis of Bishop Curry's speech, his sermon, his proclamation, you can't take it back. 1 billion people heard his call to justice. They heard him quote Martin Luther King. They heard his voice and they saw his presence. And he said, let's take the love which is the foundation of the Christian movement, and let's take that love and let's build on it. And let's be out in the world with it. Well, I think that's good news. Do you?